My game has a spellbook, combat, building, flying, swimming, gathering, farming, spells, customization, and arena, cutscenes, and shops. But because of the great rework of 2023, they're not all hooked up. So the plan is to hook them up and invite a few people to test. I've been putting off testing for far too long because I didn't want anyone's first experience to be a broken mess. So this week I finally released a build to testers. I've been working on this project for so long, and there's issues happening in the build that I can't replicate in the editor, and it's just frustrating, to say the least. I was certainly going through it here. I wanted everything to work flawlessly and be able to add in tons of new features, but that's not a realistic expectation for testing a game of this size. Now that I've had time to reflect, there are some major positives that came out of this. Everyone agreed that the controls were intuitive. That's even despite the game not teaching the controls and there being no UI indication of what buttons do what. Everyone also really seemed to vibe with the atmosphere of the game. The bugs that cropped up were super frustrating though. The most annoying ones were ones that happened in the Windows build but not in the editor. And there were others that only happened for some players. Thankfully, I was able to fix all of these bugs through trial and error, but I felt like I needed a better long-term solution. So, taking some inspiration from Minecraft, pressing F4 now opens a debug menu that displays all of these stats for the game. Aiming at different objects shows specific debug text. For better or worse, I haven't run into any build-only bugs since implementing this, but it was useful for testing some of the new farming mechanics. Plants now only grow when they are within a target light range and properly watered. This modifier number mostly tracks the time the plant has spent not growing, but adding to this will increase the growth rate, perhaps similar to this thing from Minecraft. I also made it so that night causes the outside lights to automatically turn on. The ambient sound changes, and fireflies start spawning. In general, as I've added more sounds to the game, things that are missing sounds have become painfully obvious. So there are now surface-specific footstep sounds. And when loot drops, it makes a little collision sound. I've really noticed that subtlety is really the key here. I know, you might be asking why I'm working on stuff like this instead of more spells or enemies or whatever. There's actually a few reasons. The last few months have actually been pretty brutal with a lot of rework. Doing little things like this keep me working on the game and have helped me personally avoid burnout. I think we all know about the YouTube game dev graveyard, and this helps me stay out of there. In the last year, I have 3,000 hours just testing the game. Making my time more enjoyable in this game is definitely a must. And simply tunnel vision. As a solo dev, it's easy to get distracted by anything. When I'm in the project every day, it can be easy to not realize the most important thing to work on at any given moment. Thankfully, because there are testers now, I can ask them what they think the game needs most at any given point. And recently, I did exactly that. The overwhelming response was quests. I've been drained after the rework, so I've been avoiding quests because they also require a dialogue system. I just really didn't want to add in more systems. But if there's any silver lining, the dialogue system fits in nicely with the existing interaction system. The quest and dialogue system are pretty involved, so I plan on giving them their own video, so I'll be quick here. I just want to emphasize how powerful of a tool they are to video games. When done right, they breathe life into a world and give the player purpose and direction. It's fine if a player wants to ignore quests and go off on their own and explore, but they're always there as a guiding light. You can encourage players to go places, learn, and try out new mechanics they might not otherwise. One of my gripes with games is when they handhold too much or have walls of tutorial text to learn new things. Quests are a great opportunity to teach the player without it feeling like a tutorial. I also find myself often in games reading the dialogue for the first few hours and then getting frustrated when it overshadows my ability to experience gameplay. At least for me, choice and freedom is what makes games fun. I plan on keeping the amount of dialogue as low as I can while still building characters and telling the story. It's one thing to say that, but it's another to do it. I implemented a prototype quest to test my ability to do this, and while I won't spoil it, the testers who tried it did seem to really enjoy it. I always enjoy quest boards in games because they serve as a central place to gain a little money, XP, or new items. There's now a community quest board in Mana Valley that will periodically serve new quests. After the thumbs up from the testers on the prototype quest, I wanted to start implementing the main quest line, but it starts in the house the player spawns in. I expanded this space to feel less cramped, but the building module system didn't allow for that, so for months, it's just had giant holes in it. I could just adjust the 3D models of the houses and ignore the building system. That's what a lot of other games do. But I love building in games, and I think it would be really cool if the player had enough building components to be really creative. If I use the existing design of the starting house as the guide for what components I need in the modular building system, it could drastically improve the building experience. There are only a handful of existing pieces, so there's a bunch more to make. I started with these stairs because at the time, there wasn't a way for the player to go between floors. Easy enough. Then I started with the roof. The existing module size I set up gave the roof the same slope as the stairs. This would be fine for almost any other game, but steeper roofs just feels so much more witchy. So I implemented a steeper roof. Given the current grid size, this proved to be pretty problematic. Ultimately, I ended up shrinking the module size of everything to conform with the steeper roof. That means I had to redo all of the existing building components, but thankfully it took me less than a day. I think the change is worth it, and it gives the player so many more creative possibilities. The core of the starting house is now mostly done, and I'm excited that it's not just a placeholder. Obviously, the house needs more decorations and furnishings. My plan here going forward is that everything that I add to this house will also be buildable by the player. I plan to make this area a kitchen. This is Nana's bedroom, and outside there will be a little garden. Beds have been in the game for a long time, but the player can now place them, and when it's dark out, they can be used to sleep. The sleep screen shows the new day and will eventually show items sold off during the night. Buildable cell boxes are coming up on my list of things to do. Up until this point, doors weren't operational, but now they are. I strategically made them so they detect the direction of the player and will always open outward. I determined the opening speed of them in relation to a player running. Doors stay open until the player is far enough away from them, and then they automatically close. I've been playing some popular games with building systems, and it's made me realize my tendency for perfectionism. There's stuff I obsess over that these games simply ignore. I don't mean that as a diss, there's certainly a lot of value to not worrying about minor details. It just made me realize how passionate I am about this game. That passion can thrive because of you. Because of your support on Patreon and YouTube, a publisher doesn't dictate how and when this game needs to be finished. To help keep things that way, you can support this project by joining Patreon or becoming a YouTube member through the links in the description. In this video, I touched on the building system, but it's come a really long way. If you're curious where it's been, you can click the video on your screen to see what it looked like a year into development.